First question is for potholer. What was the most interesting story you ever worked on as a journalist?
Ha ha! Oh my God. Weird. I suppose one of them would be when I went to the headquarters of the largest gangster organization in Japan, the Yakuza, called the Yamaguchi-gumi, which is based in Kobe. And I was covering the Kobe earthquake, which in itself was quite interesting because you can't get into that area. I had to hire a bicycle. Actually, I think I bought the bicycle, but it was fantastic going along these 5-lane highways that were completely deserted. It was like being in a surreal world. There was no electricity. It was all completely dark, and the speed limit was 80. But I had to cover the local gangster organization because they were the only ones actually helping people. They were far more effective than the government in handing out goods and so on. Because they basically went to a company and they said, you want to donate to the earthquake relief, don't you? And of course, companies would have no choice. The Yakuza asked you to do something, you hand it over. And so I called up the Yamaguchi Gumi. I got their phone number from a friend of mine, phoned them up, and the answer was Yamaguchi Gumi headquarters. This is the largest organization in the world. This is the largest gangster organization in the world, 90,000 people. And I asked to speak to their public relations officer, not knowing if they would have one, and they did have one. And I asked if I could come down, and they invited me down to their headquarters. So for the entire day, I was hanging out with these gangsters with knife wounds and broken noses, and there they were helping people out. And this was a building that I knew very well from the outside because it's the organization's, the gangster organization's headquarters building. But it was great to be on the inside and spend the day there. That's probably perhaps the weirdest. I don't know if it might be the most interesting.
I think so.
I mean, I obviously prepared again some notes in case we had a moment to fill in. I mean, your career has been very interesting and it has taken you all over the world. Not sure exactly how many countries you've visited and whether you've been based all the time, but you've certainly traveled around. Ended up in Australia, obviously. Was that a matter of choice or was that a matter of work? If you could choose somewhere else to settle down, would you have chosen anywhere else? Microphone not unmuted.
Oh,
I
sorry.
thought you were a professional potter.
There you go. I'm getting rusty now. You know why I had to retire. Yeah, it was really a choice that was made for the sake of the children because either they would go through. I was based in Tokyo. I covered the Far East, so basically as far from North Korea down to Burma and Indonesia was my beat. The only place I couldn't cover was China because they wouldn't let me in there. And I never found out why that was. I must have written something at some point that displeased them. And I've tried many, many times to get into China. I even sat at one point next to the Chinese foreign minister at a dinner. And I have no idea why I was put on the table with these other people, but it was a dinner where we had lots of statesmen and journalists and so on. So we were all seated at these tables, and I was next to the Chinese foreign minister. And he had his interpreter there. So I said to him, look, I'd really like to go and cover China. And he said, well, you have to apply for and I've been through that process. They won't let me in. But I couldn't even get the foreign minister to let me in. Yeah, that was my beat, basically. And because we were based in Tokyo, we could have relocated to somewhere where the schools would have been better. I just didn't want the kids, neither did my wife. We didn't want our kids to go through the Japanese state school system because it is absolutely crushing. And Australia was a place that I absolutely love. It's a fantastic country. I worked here in the 1970s. My wife loves it too. So we decided to come out and base myself here. And it's not as easy now.
I've got to pick up on one of the points you've just made because, as I say, we've got non-stamp collector with us who is a teacher in Japan. And you're dissing the Japanese education system. I think it was quite good. What's wrong with it?
It's excellent in terms of memorizing. But what the kids have to go through, it's a very rigid, disciplined system, and they have a thing in Japan called shiken shikoku, which means exam hell. and kids commit suicide because of the pressure. They are, you know, a lot of my daughter's school friends, they used to do 5 days a week at the school, and on the sixth day, on a Saturday, they go to the local juku, which is the cramming school, where they'd have to cram, and it was very, very pressured. It doesn't leave them thinking very imaginatively, and you know, there are different ways of educating children. They get a great education here in Australia, and I'm homeschooling them a little bit, but most of their education has been through the state system, and they've done extremely well out of it. So yeah, Australia was a good move. Now I still do go overseas to cover. I was in Cambodia a few years ago. I covered the Taiwanese election a few years ago. I've covered the slavery issue in Thailand and Southeast Asia. And I've just come back from a trip to Jordan where I was up at the Syrian border covering the refugees there, and then I was down in Egypt covering the situation in Cairo. So I still get around a lot more. There's not as much news in Australia, obviously, but I prefer to...
Well, you've touched upon a lot of areas which I'd love to ask you about, and perhaps we'll, if we have time, come back to them during the course of the show. But I know that Samuel wants to make another point. Samuel, once you made the point again, I apologise. I will remove you because I've got people waiting. But over to you, Samuel.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a really broad question, and I just thought of it out of nowhere. What would the members of the show do if you were given $3 million and for hypothetical reasons you can't donate to charity? Now, it's just a random question I came up with.
$3 million to do what we want to, but we can't give it to charity. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Catch up with you soon. Whilst someone deals with that problem, I'll bring in the next caller. Who wants to take that? You've got $3 million. What are you going to do with it?
I'd be out of debt.
Right. Awesome. Aaron's done.
I can answer it very quickly and just say I would buy a boat. My wife would want to buy a house, so we'd end up buying a house.